If we stand together, we'll never fall. We can make a difference and answer the call.
Well, hi there, and welcome back to another episode of the All Around Growth Podcast. My name is Rob Kaiser, and I am your host. Today is Wednesday, July 13th, 2022, and this is episode number 377 of a show that provides insight and tools to build the life and homestead of our dreams. And that's right, I said our dreams because we can't just do this alone. We can't build the lives and homesteads of our dreams by ourselves. We've got to do this with other people, with our families, and that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about family, and I'm excited to talk about that today. I'm excited to bring this episode to you today. I'm excited for a couple of reasons. First of all, this is the first show where I've got an interview prepared for you. And secondly, this interview show is something that I've been thinking about for a while, and for all sorts of reasons I've yet to pull the trigger on. However, I'm no longer fully employed. I've got more flexibility in my schedule than I've ever had before, and it's time to make this and several other things happen. It's time to do this. And the fact that employment, lack of employment, whatever, that's an excuse, because I may say to myself that, hey, I'm not fully employed, but the reality is, with the work that I do with my dad, and then the time that we spend at the farmers market on Saturdays, that just about adds up to 40 hours of true work. And in order to put some metrics to this and track it, I've actually begun keeping a time card, but we'll talk more on that later in the week, maybe even next week when we are talking about career. But today we're talking about family. Today we're talking about interviews, and future interviews in the show may require some changes on how this podcast takes place, and with me learning how to podcast in a different, perhaps more professional way, and I'll share more on that when I make those changes. But for now, I found another suitable workaround to get this content out there, to get this interview out there. But before we dive into this audio interview, which was recorded Monday afternoon, here is some context on the interview. And as this podcast grows and as this podcast expands, I want to include more relevant content in the show that is relevant to doing exactly that. The objective, accomplishing the objective of the show, which is to provide tools and resources to build the life and homestead of our dreams. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do with my life, and in large part share it all here with you. So when anyways, interviews are good. I want to do more. And since the homestead is a big part of my life, even bigger now that I'm spending more time on it, working to build the business, the family business with my dad and my mom in large part, this is where I live. This is my home. So in today's episode, we're going to do a deep dive into the history of the land and how York Meadow Farm came to be what it is today, along with some discussion about the dreams of where we're going. And all of this really came to be when I was working recently on the website, making some updates there, and I realized that there's no better time than the present to sit down with mom and dad and do an interview with them. And while the audio quality isn't the best in the interview, due to the fact that I decided to do a three-way phone call and simply record that, while the audio quality isn't the best in the interview because of the way I performed my first interview, I hope that the quality of the content and the content within the interview makes up for the lack of the audio quality. So with that, please enjoy the interview with my father and my mother from just a couple days ago, Monday, late afternoon, early evening. Enjoy.
Mom, are you there?
I am.
And Dad, are you there?
I am here.
Okay, great. So I hope that this works. This is the first attempt at an interview for the podcast, which has been something that's been requested by several people out there in the audience, and I hope that this is a successful attempt. So what we'll do today in this brief interview, the first interview on the show, is talk about part of the website where we review or provide some information on the founders of York Meadow Farm, which is you guys, Robert J Kaiser Jr. and Denise Kaiser.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this information is available on yorkmeadowfarm.com, and specifically yorkmeadowfarm.com/the-founders if people wanted to get very specific. But you can visit yorkmeadowfarm.com and just scroll all the way down to the bottom and find the founders. And I think just to provide some, just to facilitate some dialogue, I could break this down piece and read a sentence from you guys for feedback for a couple reasons, just to clarify the information in there since we're in the process of making updates to the website, and also just to have you guys talk about it and share a little bit of the story and see if there's anything that I can glean from this recording to update the information on the site. So what do you guys think? How's that sound?
Sounds
Sounds
good.
good to me.
Okay. Well, the first sentence begins as follows. Robert J. Kaiser and Denise Kaiser purchased the land where York Meadow Farm is located in Medina, Ohio in 2005. Is that correct? You guys bought
December.
it? December in 2005.
Yep.
What prompted you to buy this property?
We literally, Mom can speak to it as well. When we were looking for a place, and at that time Kathleen had her horse, and we were anticipating constructing something to board the horse. So we needed a couple of acres, and we hadn't really thought much more than that. We looked at several properties in the Medina area, maybe even Lorain County too, and this one, Mom found it, and we decided to come take a look at it. And it was a little bit more than what I think Mom was looking for initially, but we literally just fell in love with it. We came back to roughly in the vicinity where the corner of the barn is. We were standing there looking at this area, this clearing in the woods, and thinking, golly, this is beautiful. This is absolutely beautiful. We kind of looked at each other and says, yep. So we made an offer, and it was accepted, and we closed on the deal, and now we owned 19.64 acres.
Well, and to put a little romantic spin on it,
There you go.
when your dad and I were first married, I had told him that if I could have the house of my dreams, I would have 10 acres, completely surrounded by woods, with a 1-acre pond, and I would put a house right in the middle of it. And the front part of the property was about 6 acres, and when we came into the back, there was this piece of land completely had been completely cleared of all trees. It was completely surrounded by woods. It had a 1-acre pond, and right in the middle was a pavilion, which is now the site of our log cabin.
Yep. Sounds like it was meant to be almost.
Right? I mean, we just looked at each other and kind of shrugged our shoulders and said,
Yeah,
this is it. And when we went back up to the front of the property with the real estate agent and the current owner, he said, if you're really interested in this property, I'll drop $1,000 right now off the purchase price. So that just kind of sweetened the deal a little bit.
Okay. Well, that and if that was December of 2005, and let's fast forward a few years, because it and you guys can expand upon this a little bit, but I just, on the site we read, at that time in 2005, the land was being conventionally farmed in grain as it had been for decades, and that was when we first got a look at conventional farming. And then 5 years after purchasing the land, you guys assembled the family to plant 100 blueberry bushes in June of 2010. So do you guys want to talk a little bit about what, what happened between, let's just say 2006 and 2010, those 4 years, and what transpired, and you guys are in a better position to speak on that than me.
To give you,
do you want me to talk about that a little bit, Bob?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So in my work as a nurse, at that time, I was working in a weight management research program, and we teamed up with a program that was called City Fresh. And the purpose was to bring locally grown fresh produce to the inner city, which was considered at that time, and still is, unfortunately, a food desert. The project I was working on was at the inner city. And so we teamed up with City Fresh and met a gentleman called Maurice Small, who was one of the I guess you'd call it co-founders of City Fresh, and he's very passionate about locally grown fresh produce and being able to provide it to people. So what we did was we worked with people in the community. Some were patients, some were not, in this community on the east side of Cleveland. And as I got to know Maurice better, he kept saying, I wish we could get more fruit. I wish we could get more fruit. And that is kind of what spurred the planting of those 100 blueberry bushes. And I'm not sure, Bob, you'll have to refresh my memory, but I believe that we had, before that, told the man who was leasing the property to grow the conventionally grown, corn, soybeans, winter wheat, that we no longer wanted him to farm on it. So we had let the land, which was close to 6 acres, go fallow for several years. And then we got together with family and friends and decided that we would plant the blueberry bushes.
Yeah, and along those lines too, I also was looking. Well, first off, we've always had a garden. Going back to Rob, when you were born, actually, that was we had a big, fairly big garden on West Hedgewood for a couple of years in a row, and then we also had a garden on Brook Lane. We didn't have a garden, I don't think, in Cincinnati when we took that detour down there.
No.
But we were thinking, gee whiz, what are we going to do with all this land? And I thought, well, we've already garden. Geez, we may as well have a big garden. And around that time, so we wanted it to be organic. So in 2008, we told Jason Tomey that we were going to. We were not going to have him grow on our property anymore. So, and we wanted to, at least for organic certification, you had to have like 3 years of no pesticides, no herbicides, no artificial fertilizers, that sort of thing. And at that time, we were thinking about organic certification, and we just knew that was one of the requirements. So we decided that we would stop him from growing, and we would then start to develop a little garden and start growing some things ourselves. And at the same time, I also went down to at that time, the farmers market in Medina was just getting started. Only been operational a year or two. And I talked to a fellow by the name of Dave Civitello, who was part of the Ohio State Extension program. And one of the things he said interesting was, boy, I'd really like to get some more fruit in here, berries. So Mom and I were thinking, okay, maybe what we need to do here is have a fruit and berry production operation. So that's kind of where we were going at the start. Mom also was thinking about, we had a couple of plots growing some fresh flowers and herbs and different sorts of things that we were contemplating selling at the farmers market. And in 2011, I guess it was, maybe been a little bit before that, but I'm not real clear. I do know 2011 we said, well, we're going to now be a vendor at the farmers market. And the thing is, we didn't have a whole lot to sell at that point. The blueberries weren't producing. At least they were very small plants. They were, I think 2 or 3 year old plants when we put them in the ground, and they had yet to produce anything. But that was the intent: fruit and vegetables. Fruit, not so much vegetables, but certainly fruit and berries. Fruit trees. We were, and over the years, there's actually a little bit of a sad story there. At one point, I think I planted, I don't know, somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 or 10 peach and nectarine trees, and the deer with their antlers just pretty much killed them all. And then we planted, then we tilled up some more beds behind where the current asparagus is. The asparagus, I think we put that in 2010 as well. And so actually to the south of that, we had probably 20 or 30 beds that we tilled up, and we planted raspberries, lots of raspberries. And then I don't know if you remember how many there were that we planted, but there was a lot. It seemed to be like 60 or 70 raspberries.
Yeah, I was going to say 60. Yeah.
And then unfortunately none of those made it. And then we started knowing observing some different behaviors of growing. Something would grow real well in one spot, and 20 feet to the east of it, nothing would grow at all. It was just bizarre. And we were having soil tests done, but the way the soil tests were recommended that we do that is take a chunk of soil from this spot, that spot, that spot, that spot. So you got really a blend. We never really had anything specific to a specific part of the ground. Anyway, that's kind of how we started down the path of participating in the farmers market. What our long-term goals were. Does that sound like a pretty good assessment there, Den?
Yeah, I would say so. And I think part of the issue that was the challenge for us is that at the beginning, we were not living in Medina. We were living in Bay Village, which was a 45-minute trip. So we were not able to, we were mostly coming up on the weekends. So therein was part of the issue with trying to grow some of the crops too, was that we couldn't get out here to do on a regular basis to do the type of watering that needed to be done. So I think that was part of the issue. Once we finally sold our house in Bay and moved into Medina, then we were, even though we weren't physically living here in the property, we were only maybe 10 or 15 minutes away. And that's when things started to improve, and we were working on our market garden. And of course, because the soil had been conventionally farmed for so many years, the soil was really pretty depleted in a lot of nutrients. And so we picked one spot to create a market garden and worked very hard, to make amendments to that soil to get it to the point. Now it's beautiful. It is very, very beautiful soil right now. But of course, over the course of time, what we did kind of morphed into other projects. And so we are no longer growing vegetables ourselves at this time, but we are leasing it to a tenant farmer who is growing some absolutely beautiful organic crops there.
Yeah, and
so can I interrupt real quick before we go into tenant farmer and get ahead? Because this is actually something that I haven't. Well, we have stuff in there elsewhere in the website about this, so maybe it's not really appropriate for the founder section. But you mentioned that one of the challenges initially was living in Bay while trying to manage this property here, and for the first few years, that is. And what year did you sell the house in Bay, or how many years was it?
Only one, actually. We sold the house in about September of 2006.
Okay. Okay.
So it was about that time we moved down here to Medina.
Okay. And then I'm thinking of some other things about when I moved back from North Carolina, but I don't want to override the story with you and Mom about coming back here. But what I had written was 5 years after purchasing the land, Bob Kaiser assembled the family to plant approximately 100 blueberry bushes in June 2010. And we talked about that, you guys talked about that, with the addition of the initial intent being fruit trees and veggies. And then in the following season, you mentioned that you made the first appearance at the Medina Farmers Market located in the Medina Public Square Historic District in downtown Medina. And that's about where it ends in terms of the history of the founders. I then wrote, we enjoy building and developing new skills as a former suburban family, learning to build our own small acre regenerative farm and homestead businesses from scratch. I guess it ends there because when we first did the site, that was probably 5 or 6 years ago, and that's why or maybe 4 or 5 years ago or whenever, and that's why we're kind of looking and talking about these updates. So with that said, is there, what else would you guys like to include in this for people to learn about and read about when they visit the website? Because right now we're kind of at that point where we got into the market, and you had just started, and what do you want to talk about, or what would you like to include from the years 2012, 2013 on into the current day? Well, that's kind of a lot, but
well, yeah, there was really a lot. I mean, we were growing things, and every year we were looking at what other vendors were selling, and what gaps we could identify, and things that we could grow, and we grew a lot of different things. What actually happened, though, as time went on, and bear in mind, Mom and I were both working full time. Literally, we were both working full time. And up until about 2016, when I backed off of a full-time job and just concentrated on teaching, and at that point, I was going to start focusing more on the growing of things. Well, we decided to start building the house in 2016, and lo and behold, by September of 2017, the barn and the house had been completed, and we had moved in. So we didn't have a whole lot of growing opportunity during those 2 years. And at some point, Ken Rowe, and I don't recall how he got in touch with us or how we got in touch with him, but what we were doing is he wanted to grow stuff on our property, and we decided that we would buy the produce from him. Actually, we would sell the produce for him at the market. And then Cody came along, and it just sort of evolved to the point. Oh, and not the least of which was the recognition that in 2016 I turned 70 years old, and I'm 76 today. So what I also know is what was happening is that Mom and I were just getting to the point where we could not produce the work that we used to, and just generally a recognition that maybe the time had passed to where we were going to be active growers ourselves. But certainly we wanted to have our land be productive, and that's where Ken came in, and then shortly thereafter Cody joined him as well.
And I also think that one of the things that we kept thinking about was, I mean, we were still very much early learners when it came to the process of growing vegetables, and a lot of times we weren't getting things into the ground until May. We really hadn't invested in having a high tunnel or any of those kind of things so that we could extend our growing season. We were still relatively considered newbies, I guess, in all of this. So I kept thinking, what else could we do, or could I do? Something that I could do during the winter time that I could make in the winter, and it would still be good for selling in the early part of the farmers market season before the produce was ready to harvest. So that's where I started looking at soaps and starting to develop a line of soaps, because I could make them in the wintertime. They would have plenty of time to cure, and I would have those to sell in the early weeks of the market.
Was this also the time that you started making soaps and bath and body products correspond with the time frame that Dad was making breads, sourdough?
Yeah.
Yes.
You want to talk about that a little bit, Dad?
Yeah. That first year we were at the market, we didn't have a whole lot of produce, not much.
And this was like this, just as a reminder, this was like 2011, 2012, somewhere around there. Okay.
Yeah, 2011, 2012. And so we had some ideas. That first year, Mom was making biscottis, and we were giving away, that first year, we were basically giving away coffee, taking donations for it, and selling biscotti. And I was also my idea was that each week I would produce a different variety of bread, and because our sign said this week's bread, and we eventually just settled on the sourdough and the Italian bread, the baguettes and so
Oh,
forth.
that's right. Yeah.
And so then the second year, I stayed with the bread, and that's when Mom started, introducing her soaps, and the whole idea of self-sufficiency was really, I think, possibly had its roots back then. As we started, it kept going forward. And of course, each year we would have more and more produce. So 2014, 2015, and we had more and more produce to sell. But we were still doing the bread, and we were still doing the soaps. And I think one important aspect of this whole thing is that we enjoyed it. We really enjoyed the market experience, going to the market on a Saturday morning, setting our stuff up, interacting with the customers, and taking great pride that people were buying these things that we made with our hands, our own two hands, or four hands, I guess. And that brought me great joy. And interacting with the customers, we found we really liked it. And
educating the customers.
Yeah, that too. Oh, yeah.
Okay. So 2014, 2015 comes along, and we're bringing more produce to market, and really enjoying things. And then things at the market kind of stayed that way for 2016 and 17. The continued evolution of the bath and body products and the breads and the kind of dialing in some of the products that were being made. But then by the time 2019 rolled around, that was the do you guys want to talk about what happened with the market transition, or the transition from the market to the VFW market and all of that, or is that even worth? Do you think that's worth getting into right now in terms of the historical aspect of the? I mean, maybe we could talk about it, but maybe it's not worth including on the website. But for those who are listening and those who are interested in the story of the farm, maybe that might be some interesting context to hear about, just from how we went from the Medina Farmers Market, where we began and where we are now, and how we went to the other market and how we ended up back there.
Well,
I was just going to say, I think that trying to remember exactly when Cody started, because I think that was really, I think, kind of a pivotal point, because
let me jump in real quick with Cody. So there was some confusion about how Ken ended up here in the first place. Ken got here in the first place because after the high tunnel was built in 2015, I was working with you guys for 2015, 2014, 15, 16. And then because I believe I made a number of bad decisions in doing things that I shouldn't have been doing and extending myself beyond my means, I went through Burnout 2.0 and went back to my career and stopped working with you guys, basically. And for almost a full season, the high tunnel and the surrounding garden areas went fallow, for lack of a better term. I had cover crops in there and did rotating buckwheat crops and some other stuff around the tunnel itself, but I placed an ad for someone to use it because it broke my heart seeing it go vacant because I was having this mental crisis, having a breakdown basically, and Ken took advantage of that for a couple of years, and then when Cody's parents moved and he needed a place because
Right.
he lost all his bed space when his parents moved. That's when you guys were having communication about that and invited him over, and
Right.
he started working with Ken. So that's how that all kind of
Okay.
occurred
Yes.
in a time frame.
I remember that now. Yeah, and we, I think when, and it wasn't just you deciding not to work on the farm anymore. That kind of, I think, coincided with the time that Dad and I were like, we're still working full time, and we're getting older, and the amount of physical hours required to do what we had been doing before, we were just working slower, and we kind of sat back, and I guess, I don't know if you want to call it that we had a little bit of a burnout ourselves, that we kind of decided that, maybe we better rethink. There are still other things that we can do to bring good products to the market that may not necessarily require us to input as many physical hours as we had been. So, we kind of, I think at that point, started kind of phasing ourselves out.
Right.
And then of course, I had, when I got ill, which is probably 6 years ago now, Bob?
Yeah, let me jump in at this point, because that's a crucial transition period. When and there's a separate plot line in this whole story is the COVID-19 stuff, which in 2020, pretty much due to all the uncertainty and what went on with regards to Main Street Medina and so forth, and the vendors forming the market at the VFW, what we were doing at the time, Mom and I were still growing a couple of things that we grew really well and did very well in our soil. One was the Market More cucumbers. One was the Provider green beans. And we had a very popular item with the Mom was growing like 4 or 5 different kinds of little cherry tomatoes, little yellow ones and orange ones and red ones and pear-shaped ones and so forth, and putting them in these little pint assortments in these baskets that they sold like crazy. So we were still doing some things, but at the same time, that was the year that we started to also sell some of Cody's stuff. Kale, carrots, and by this time the asparaguses were producing, so we were selling that for at least that limited window when asparagus was growing, like May and June, and then that I guess it was in that first year. Yeah, halfway through 2020 market season, I just decided that I could not do bread anymore. It was just getting too darn difficult for the amount of work that we had to put in. I enjoyed making the bread. People loved it, and I loved the fact that people loved it, and so I reluctantly stopped baking bread in the middle of the market season in 2020. Then 2021, we pretty much, and then also during that time period, the market manager, a lady by the name of Nancy Romans, she was saying, you know what, we need somebody to do pickles. And I says, I can do pickles. In fact, I had some pickles that I had made, and Nancy came over here and had some of the pickles, and she said, okay, you're going to be the pickle vendor. So, okay, we started to making pickles, fermented pickles, sours, and
but that was before 21. because
Right,
you had been
2020.
doing some ferments when I got sick, and that's what really kicked the ferments into high gear.
Yeah, and I remember Robin Swoboda, you might remember, she gave me this huge amount of jalapeno peppers, which I decided to try to ferment and have a fermented hot sauce. And it was more of gee, can I do this kind of thing? And then Mom's dietary, or rather I should say the antibiotic she was taking was playing havoc with her digestive system. So that's when I thought, okay, well, let's try to make some sauerkraut. Let's try to do other fermented things, fermented foods.
And what year was that with Mom's, all that gastrointestinal stuff?
What's that?
Boy, I think that's been maybe 6 years ago now. That's why I'm saying that was way before the whole COVID thing. I'm going to say that was probably like 2017, 16, when I went through that. So, Dad had been making some pickles before that, but that really kicked up the whole, making the sauerkraut and so forth, because the GI doctor, and Dad had been making kefir, and Dad had been making, we both had been making yogurt from the time that you guys were little. And so we had kefir and the kombucha and those kind of things. And the GI doctor I was seeing at the time said, you need to eat all kinds of ferments, everything. Drink the kombucha, eat the kefir, eat the pickles, eat sauerkraut. And so that is kind of what spurred things, even more ferments to get things started so that my gut would heal.
So I was just doing a bunch of research on fermented stuff, and it kind of grew into what we're doing now.
Okay.
Although the scale today, with your help, Rob, oh my God, it's just dwarfs what we did in the early days.
Yeah, we're growing it. That's for sure. Yeah, that's interesting. I guess looking at this and reflecting back on what we've done and over the past 10 years, because we really haven't covered any of that online, is interesting, because it's almost been about that amount of time since I've been home. I mean, I officially moved back, or arrived home from my various journeys in late 2013, and it's been it kind of seems like yesterday, but here we are, 2022.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I will definitely include some of this stuff in the founder's information on the page, some of it, not all, and I'll review it with you when we get to that point of making changes. But more on that later. Is there anything else that as we kind of come to the conclusion that you want to chime in and include that we didn't talk about yet?
Yeah, we did, and that had to do with your participation too. You had built the high tunnel, and you were very, very interested in permaculture in those days, and you saw, because of the land we had, you saw an opportunity to see if it would be possible to implement some of those practices, regenerative agriculture and so forth, on our property here. So we've kind of took some stabs at different things, and I guess you could say that we kind of were in the formative stages, and today we're kind of still in the formative stages of that. But I think there's some definite possibilities of continuing that development in the future.
I think so too. I think the way that honestly, I don't regret anything because the way I went about it, in the gonzo way that I did, trying to be rock star that I was so starry-eyed over and seeing in everyone else, taught me that you can't do that. You have to be who you are and do things for reasons that matter to you and your family and that are appropriate for the context of your life. And I'm glad I tried to go, well, I didn't try. I definitely did too much too fast, and it didn't last, and that contributed to the whole burnout thing. But if I didn't do that, then I'd be on that same track now, and it would have just delayed everything else. So that was probably the best failure that I ever had, because we got that stupidity out of the way first.
Well, and in addition
I
to
think that, I think,
and it was a learning.
Yeah, and I think that, to a certain extent, I think Dad and I went through some of those too, with the fruit trees and with the raspberries, and kind of we just dove in, and of course, when you're looking, when you're trying to do your research, you could look at 20 different sites and get 20 different opinions on growing raspberries, and with us being kind of the fledgling people, it was, and not living here at the site and still trying to work full time and trying to balance all these things. You can't do, you just can't do it all and do it all well. And and I think that was the thing that you learned. That was the thing that Dad and I learned over time. And we also learned that, in all honesty, raising and growing vegetables, it's a huge time input with not necessarily a whole lot of profit. And
like we've talked about, it's not.
Yeah.
I think it's less so of a profit thing, but when people think about farmers markets, they think, I'm going to be a farmer. I'm going to go to farmers markets and I'm going to grow produce and I'm going to go to, that's what I'm going to do. And you guys seem to have taken this alternative approach, which I think is worth pointing out, because if people are thinking about doing something and changing their life path, sure, they could do everything that everyone else is doing and try to do it as good or better than them, knowing that they're coming in with likely a hell of a lot less of experience than the person who's been doing it year after year,
right,
and has already established themselves. Whereas, from the time you guys went to market, you were looking around, hey, is anybody doing the Scotty? No. All right, let's try that. Is anybody doing breads? Well, not very many people, so let's try that. Is anybody doing berries? Not really, because that's what the market manager at the time suggested. And let's try that, and then the new market manager said, hey, we need somebody to do pickles. Well, I can do that. I'm already doing other ferments, so I'll try that. And you guys were always looking to fill some sort of open niche or need, and that was, I think that's been a big thing that's been, I think that's been something that's important and something that people could take into consideration as they make their own plans, because I think that's been a valuable, and I think it's going to continue to be a valuable component into the success of the business that we're all building together, because there's just not a lot of people who are doing the fermented foods the way that we're doing them. There's not a lot of people who are doing the bath and body products the way that we're doing them. So it's kind of nice, and that also, unlike and Mom, you alluded to this also, unlike a lot of, certainly with annual produce, less so with perennial produce and foods, but the shelf stability and the perishability of those foods is something that you definitely have to deal with. And with products like this that are more shelf stable, it's just a little bit easier to manage and operate, especially when you're working on such a small, skeleton crew like us. It's just the three of us.
right,
So that's important.
exactly.
And I
And
think
and
maybe
things are going to Go ahead, dear.
It maybe to kind of put a bow on this to some degree is, and Rob, Mom and I obviously, we were observing what you were doing and reading much of the same material on permaculture and regenerative agriculture, and then realizing that it made enormous sense. And so even though we may not have jumped in with both feet because we had our feet firmly planted in other stuff, but the idea was there. The seed was planted, so to speak, to use that kind of a metaphor. And as we've been thinking too, the whole notion, and oddly enough, I've got to say this too. For years, I was reading, and I think you were too, Rob, Backwoods Home Magazine.
Yeah.
And there was something very appealing about self-sufficiency. And even though I don't subscribe to that anymore, the seed was planted there as well. And I would like to ultimately see us at a position, at a point where we would be pretty much self-sustaining here. As long as we've got Cody, and for the time being, I don't see that changing a whole lot. He's happy to work here. He wants to grow food, and we're providing him a place to do it. And so there is a part, the fresh fruit and the fresh vegetables part of the part of our existence, and getting and of course dealing as we do now, buying all our everything we buy, literally, or almost everything we buy, is we try to buy as much local stuff as we can when it's in season. We're buying. We bought the pork from Krista. We bought beef from Royal Fair and the Reesers, and and we had the ducks here, which were an absolute joy, and I love the duck eggs. And I see us doing that again. Maybe some chickens and ducks, or maybe just chickens. At some point, maybe adding sheep, maybe adding a goat or two, maybe adding a pig or two, maybe adding a cow or two. I mean, it has the potential. I don't know what the time frame is going to be for that, but it's all moving towards this. And everything that's happened over the past 15 years, even more than that. Let's see. 15 years, 16 years, has kind of started to dovetail and tie together, and to where Mom and I are kind of embracing this notion of being more, to the extent that we can, self-sufficient, and at least, and also interacting with other people here locally, to be able to have, oh gosh, I don't know how to describe it at that point in time, a self-sufficient life. Things that you did some years ago, building the high tunnel and all of that, your investigations into the regenerative agriculture, the permaculture, and so forth, and you shared a lot of that material with us, and it's I don't know what the ultimate end is going to be, but it's going to be some combination of all of those things. Would you agree with that, Den?
Yeah, I would. And I think we're going to continue to morph. We're going to continue to grow. I mean, that's what happens. The more you learn, the more things that you can input. Do I continue with the soap, or do I, give that up and just go in with you guys, and do we just continue to grow the fermented business? Those are all things that we have to think about. And, I don't anticipate what I'm doing changing much in the next 3 years, because I still have 3 years to work until I can retire. But, after that, I will have a lot more time to be able to devote to whatever it is that that we need to do, as a family business.
And your work, Rob, trying to get to the point to where we have an active online marketing. I think there's huge potential there too, and that's very likely the next phase of how things are going to evolve. At least that's how I see it at this point.
I think so, especially after doing a little bit of research we did and are seeing how things can operate and how very similar our processes are to. I don't know. I agree. I'm excited for the future. We've come a long way. You guys have come a long way from way back when in 2005 and 2006, and since I moved back, we've come a long way together. And it's, even though we've been at it for a long time, it sort of feels like it's just the beginning, because in a sense, it is just the beginning, because this is my job now. I work here.
Yeah. Well,
and we're continually evolving, which is what we need to do. If we can't stay stagnant.
If you're not growing, you're dying, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, this is, I don't know. I guess I'll just wrap it up and then conclude this, and just thank you for the opportunity to be here and participate in all of this with you both. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm very grateful for it. I get a lot of joy in doing the work with both of you, and I get a lot of joy sharing it with people. And this is why I wanted to, I want to do interviews, but this is the big part of the reason why I wanted to interview you guys first, because in this show, people know what's going on here with me and where I live, and in some part, in some capacity, what's going on here. But I'm sure a lot of people follow the farm on social media and things like that, and maybe even a few people subscribe to the newsletter. And for those who are interested in the newsletter, I'll link to all of this in the show notes, and with links where you can sign up and learn more about it. But I lost my train of thought. I look forward to the future and where we're going. And I just wanted to say thanks to you and thanks to you both, Mom and Dad, and thanks to everybody out there that took the time to listen to this interview with the three of us. I appreciate it. And you guys want to add anything in closing?
I don't think so, honey. I think we've pretty much covered a lot of information this evening.
Yeah, we sure did, and we could probably continue babbling on for quite a while more, but I don't think we got the time for that.
No, but not today. But there's plenty more in the future. So, hey, let's keep our fingers crossed that my technological wizardry allowed a successful recording of this phone call. Otherwise, we just had a lovely 40-minute conversation amongst ourselves and set the tone for the next official one that we'll successfully record, which will likely be even better. So, anyways.
Well, and I certainly wanted to say, as Dad has said, that, thank you, because your efforts are helping us to be able to move things forward as well. So we really appreciate the time and the effort that you're putting into this as well.
It's my pleasure. I'm happy to. All right. Well, we won't Midwest nice off today.
Thank you so much.
So. All right. You are welcome. Thank you, and thanks to everyone else out there. And I'll probably see you guys a little bit later tonight, Mom and Dad.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks so much, honey. Okay.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Okay, well, as you heard, Dad and Mom are very hopeful about the future of the land and the future of the homestead here at York Meadow Farm. The potential of the land is great. This is a wonderful piece of land, almost 20 acres. Dad spoke about that earlier in the interview. And, I agree with Dad that over the past 15 years or so, that all the work that's been done here, largely by Mom and Dad, and in part by me over the past 8-9 years or so, is really beginning to dovetail with all of these ideas of self-sufficiency as we begin to interact with our communities in ways that facilitate that life that we want, which is a life that provides true freedom for our family. And so, at least as far as we're concerned, when we talk about building the life and homestead of our dreams, or at least when I talk about building the life and homestead of my dreams, and I hope that this applies to you if you're listening to this show, so that when we talk about building the life and homestead of our dreams, really what that means is true freedom for ourselves. Excuse me, true freedom for ourselves, so that we can provide and empower our families to create true freedom for themselves as well. So, we don't know what the ultimate end will be here, but we will continue to grow. And I really think that for a first interview, nothing could have been more appropriate for this show, titled All Around Growth, where we provide tools and resources to build the life and homestead of our dreams, as sharing something with you, some dialogue with my parents about everything that has happened thus far to get us to this point. Change and adaptation is key when you're actively building this life and homestead of your dreams. I mean, that's what has allowed us to get to where we are now with the current homestead as it is and business operations as they are. And the continual evolution of both will allow us to accomplish more than we've ever begun to realize, but a lot of that all rides on goals that we set, and that in large part begins with me setting my own goals in life. So I'll also link to the 2022 goal setting workbook that's allowed me to get some structure in my life when I need it most, and also work with my family in a way that helps us collectively get things done together, because I can't do this all myself. They can't do it all themselves. And quite frankly, we don't know what we're doing. So we all have to work together. And the more we do work on ourselves, the more we can help others and better serve others. Because I believe that when we lead a life of service, we begin to truly reap the rewards that life has to offer. Okay, guys, so I hope that you enjoyed this episode today. We'll have more interviews in the future. How frequently? I do not know. But tomorrow we're going to talk about spiritual goals, our spiritual lives. And then Friday, we're going to follow that up with some talk about social goals and our social lives. This is Rob Kaiser, and thank you.